students, hope you all are fine and enjoying your online class. In this video, let's begin with class 7 second chapter of history, that is New Kings and Kingdoms. Now in your class 6 you have read how kings are formed, and these kings used to have huge kingdom. To administer these kingdom, they require the help of the local peoples. Now these local peoples can be big landlords who used to have huge land under them. In the same way, they require help of warrior chiefs. Now these landlords and warrior chiefs came to be known as samantas or subordinates. Initially, these samantas and subordinates used to consider the king as their overlord, and they used to respect the kings. They used to give gifts to the king on occasions. But later on, when these samantas gained power, gained wealth, they used to consider themselves as king, and they overthrew the overlordship of the king. They became the king and assumed the titles of Mahasamanta or Mahamandaleshwar, which means the lord of the region. Now, one such example of this newly made king is Rashtrakutas, who were Samantas under the Chalukyas kingdom, who were prevailing in Karnataka. Now, one of the Rashtrakuta chief, Danti Durg, refused to accept the overlordship of Chalukyas and considered himself as king, declared himself as king, and performed the ritual of Hiranyagarbha. Now, what is Hiranyagarbha? Hiranyagarbha is a ritual performed with the help of Brahmins, and by this ritual, the person will be taking a rebirth in Kshatriya caste. Now, if you remember, in your class 6th you have read 4 castes. One is Brahmins, then second one is Kshatriyas, third is Vaishyas, and fourth is Shudras. And Kshatriyas were the caste who were generally the kings. Now, through this ritual of Hiranyagarbha, which is also known as golden womb, a person takes its rebirth in Kshatriya caste and becomes the king. Now that doesn't mean that to become a king you need to be Kshatriya, because in history we have few examples which proves that people from other castes also ruled. Two such examples are Kadamba Mayura Sharman, who ruled over Karnataka, and he belonged to enterprise family. That means he was from a business family. And the other one is Harichandra of Gujar Pratihara dynasty, who ruled over Rajasthan, and they belonged to Brahmin family. They both gave up their profession and took arms to become kings. Now these newly made kings assumed great titles like Maharaja Adhiraj, which means great king. And one more title was there, Tribhuvan Chakravartin, which means overlord or king of 3 worlds. But still, after assuming these great titles, still they have to share their power with samantas and local people of the region like peasants and traders, etc., to run the administration effectively. With this, these kings require money or resource which was collected by the people living in that region like peasants, traders, artisans and cattle keepers. For example, whatever peasants produced, one part of that produce was given to the king. In the same way, whatever cattle keeper, artisans or traders used to earn or produce, one part of that was given to the king. And it was also known as rent, because at that time whatever land was there under the kingdom, it was all supposed to be the land of king, and people living on that land has to pay rent. By this, the king used to collect money or resource. Now you might be thinking that what do these kings do of these resources? So these resources were spent in the establishment of the kings. How? by constructing huge temples, because at that time it was believed that the more huge the temple, the more powerful is the king. So king used to spend these resources in construction of huge temples and forts. Some of these resources were also spent in fighting wars. Now, if a king wants to expand its kingdom, he has to capture more and more lands. And to capture more and more lands, he has to fight wars. So some of the resources was spent in fighting wars and in establishing the king, making the king more powerful. Now, the duty of collecting these resources were also distributed. It was given to any influential person of that region. This influential person can be the relative of the king or any powerful person of the region. Now, these duties of collecting resources was hereditary. Hereditary means that it passes from one generation to another generation. For an example, if a person is given a duty of collecting resources, automatically his son will get that duty and this will be transferred to their next generations within the family. And same was the case with the army duties also. So this is how these newly made kings used to administer their kingdom. Prashastis and land grants. Prashasti is a small piece of metal on which Brahmins used to write. It contains all details of the king. It is generally written in praise of the king, so we cannot rely or trust these Prashasti as a source. But these Brahmins used to write these Prashastis in praise of the king so that kings can get impressed by them and grant them land. Yes, kings used to reward Brahmins by granting lands, and these land grants were recorded on copper plates. These copper plates were kept by Brahmins as proof. Now, if we go and buy a land, we get papers of that land as registry and we keep that registry with us. In the same way, these copper plates were kept by the Brahmins, and one such example of Prashasti is of Nagbhat. Nagbhat was a Gurjar Pratihara king. His Prashasti is written in Sanskrit. It is found in Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh. It contains all the achievements of Nagbhat as well as all the areas he has ruled. So maybe Prashastis are not that reliable, but it mentions all the areas which the king ruled. So in this manner, Prashastis are important. There's one more thing which is very different from these Prashastis is the account of Kalhan. Kalhan has written a long poem in which there he has mentioned the history of all the kings who ruled over Kashmir. Now this account, this long poem is more reliable because Kalhan has used various sources like inscriptions, documents, earlier histories, eyewitness accounts. So we can say that this is more reliable, as well as he has at places, unlike Prashasti, he has criticized the kings, so it says that it is more reliable. Warfare for wealth. Under this topic, you will come to know about the wars which was held for more and more wealth. Now, these newly made kings, as you know, was ruling on a particular region and they wanted to expand their kingdom. Now, expansion means more and more land can come under their control. So these rulers wanted to bring more and more land under their control, and one such land which they wanted under their control was the city of Kannauj. Now this city of Kannauj is very important place because it was in the Ganga Valley. Any land which is in the valley area becomes very fertile. So more fertile land means more produce, more wealth. So all the rulers prevailing at that time, like the Gurjar Pratihara king, the Palas dynasties, the Rashtrakutas, they wanted this city of Kannauj under their control. So what will happen? There was war between all these three rulers, and Because this war was between three parties, so this war came to be known as tripartite struggle. Like tripartite struggle, another such ruler was Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who ruled over Afghanistan. He raided Indian subcontinent almost every year to plunder the wealth of temples. Yes, Indian rulers, as you know, constructed large temples, and this Mahmud of Ghazni wanted to plunder these temples and carry the wealth of these temples to make his capital city at Ghazni. Now, this Mahmud of Ghazni was not only interested in the wealth of the India, but also to know about the people of Indian subcontinent. So he asked one of the scholar Al-Biruni to write an account on the people of India, and this scholar Al-Biruni wrote a book known as Kitab-ul-Hind, in which while writing this book, he took the support of Sanskrit scholars. So this book is very much reliable for the historians. Another ruler who was continuously engaged in warfare activities to gain more and more wealth was the Chahamanas, also known as the Chauhans. Now these Chauhans were ruling at Delhi and Ajmer, and they wanted to expand their kingdom in east and west, but they were checked by Chalukyas of Gujarat and Gadhawalas of western UP. Now if you remember, one of the famous ruler of the Chauhans was the Prithviraj III, who defeated an Afghan ruler, Sultan Muhammad Ghori, at Battle of Tarain in 1191. But unfortunately, next year in 1192, he was defeated by Muhammad Ghori. Now these were few rulers who were continuously at warfare activities for gaining more and more wealth. Now let's discuss about Chola kingdom, how they came to power, but before that we need to know who were Cholas. As you can see the chart, Cholas were working under Pallav kings. Pallava kings were ruling at Kanchipuram. Now this Pallava king had many chiefs working under him. One of the minor chief was Muttarayar, who was having its control over Kaveri Delta. In the same way, one of the ancient chief was Cholas, who were having their control at Urayur. Now, one of the king of Chola kingdom, known as Vijayalya, captured Kaveri Delta, and he built a town known as Thanjavur at Kaveri Delta. With this town, he also constructed a temple of goddesses Nishumbha Sudini there at Kaveri Delta. This was the contribution of Vijayalya. His successor, who was Rajaraja I, expanded the Chola territories. He included the territories of Pandyan and Pallavas in north and south. So, Rajaraja I was very important ruler of Chola dynasty, and his successor was his son Rajendra I, who also followed the steps of Rajaraja I and tried to conquer Ganga Valley, Sri Lanka and Southeast Asian countries. For that purpose, he also developed navy. So these were the three rulers of Chola dynasty. Like any other king, Chola kings also constructed big temples, one at Thanjavur and the other one Gangaikonda Cholapuram. These temples are one of the example of that time because the architecture of these temples was marvelous. After the construction of these temples, settlement in that area started. Obviously, if a Brahman or priest has to do prayings in the morning and evening, he has to settle in that area. And with Brahmins, other people who used to work in the temple, like the garland maker, the cook, musician, dancers, these people, the sweepers, these people also started living in that area, and temples also started getting land grants. Now these land grants were given by the rulers, or any influential person can give land grants. Now these land grants are like we go to the temple and we donate money in the temple, at that time people used to donate land in the temple. Now what will the Brahmins do of these lands? They will produce grains on that land, and the produce will maintain the livelihoods of the people working in that temple. Now we can say that the place where these temples were constructed not only remain the place of worship, now it has become a hub of social, political and cultural life also. With these people who were working for the temple, they were craft persons also living there. And the bronze images of Chola kingdom which were made by these craft person was very popular. It was considered as one of the finest images of the world. Generally, these images are made up of gods and goddesses. In some references you can see there were the images of the devotees also. Now the Chola kingdom was not only popular for their bronze images, but they were also popular for the developments they made in the field of agriculture. Now you might be thinking, why only field of agriculture? The reason behind it lies in the location of Chola kingdom. Now let's rethink and you recall what was the region of Chola kingdom. As I told you, they established their kingdom in Kaveri Delta region, and Delta region you all know is very fertile for production. So let's understand by this figure. Now this is the Kaveri river and it flows to meet Bay of Bengal, but before meeting it to Bay of Bengal, it is divided into several branches. Now whenever there is an overflow in the water of river Kaveri, these branches also overflows and makes this area very fertile. So the location of Chola kingdom was favorable for agriculture. That is why the kings of Chola kingdom decided to make more and more developments in the field of agriculture. That doesn't mean that before Chola kingdom there was no agriculture in this area. Agriculture do existed in this area, but production on a large scale started in the Chola kingdom. Now let's take a look on the development work done by the Chola kings. There were four types of development. First, as more land was required to increase the production on a large scale basis, so forest areas were cleared and lands were made available. Second, these land was brought on a same level to make the agriculture work feasible. Third, embankments were built in order to avoid the situation of floods whenever there is overflow in the river Kaveri. Fourth, canals were constructed in order to provide water to the fields directly through channels as and when required. By these development methods, agricultural production increased and 2 crops were grown every year. But at times, water was required, so irrigation facilities was made available, under which wells were dug and huge tanks were constructed in order to collect rainwater and use this rainwater when required. Now, these irrigation works requires lots of planning, organizing and labor work, in which village people actively participated to make the production on a large scale basis during Chola kingdom. Any kingdom becomes great only if the administration of that kingdom is well organized. So let's have a look on the administration of Chola kingdom. See, the settlements of the peasants in Chola kingdom came to be known as Ur. You can call it as small villages. We know nowadays there are small villages. We can see these villages. Now, in the same way, Chola kingdom was divided into small settlements of peasants came to be known as Ur, and group of these Ur was administered by Nadu. Nadu is the sole authority who has to perform the administrative functions like providing justice and collection of taxes, and Nadu performed these activities with the help of village council. Now there's one more very rich peasant community came to be known as Velal, who had its control in the activities of Nadu, as this Velar community is the taxpayer community, so it had its influence in the activities of Nadu under the supervision of Chola administration. With this, the kings of Chola used to give titles to the rich landowners. These titles were Muvain the Villain, which means peasant serving three kings, and Arayar, which means chief. Now these titles came with the responsibilities. So these rich landowners have to perform some responsibilities. They have to look after the important offices of the state. As we all know, lands were granted to Brahmins, which came to be known as Brahmade. So Brahmade is the land granted to Brahmins, and these lands were in Kaveri region. So more and more Brahmins started settling in this region. Now assembly was required to look after Brahmade. So influential Brahmins were the member of these assemblies, and their decisions were so important that it was recorded in inscriptions and on the walls of the temple. Like this, there was one more association, which was the Association of Traders, which came to be known as Nagaram, and this Nagaram or Association of Traders have to look after the administrative functions in town. Now let's discuss about the types of land which were there in the time of Chola kingdom. There were four types of land. First we have already discussed, that is Brahmade, which was the land granted to Brahmins. Now other three are Villainvagai, that means the land which belonged to non-Brahmins, peasants. Okay. Other than Brahmins, there were and many other communities living in that society, and the land of that people came to be known as Villainvagai. Then third type of land was Shalabhog, that means the land which was used for the maintenance of schools. Now fourth type of land was Palichandam, which means the land donated to Jains or Jain institutions. So these are the four types of land which were prevalent during Chola kingdom. Now we all know that there are lots of work in administration. So Sabha was organized who had separate committees to look after the works like irrigation work and maintenance of garden, etc. Now the members of these committees were selected by a simple method in which the names of all the eligible candidates were written on a palm leaf, and these palm leaves were kept in earthenware pot, from which a young boy was asked to take out the names for each committee one by one. Now this all information we get from Uttaramerur inscription, which is found in Chingalpur district of Tamil Nadu. Now this inscription tells us more about the members of Sabha. If a person who want to become the member of Sabha, they should have a land on which land revenue is collected. They should have their own house. They should be between 35 to 70 years of age. They should have knowledge of Vedas. They should know about administrative matters, and they should be honest. With this, there were few more conditions, like if a person was already a member of a committee in last 3 years, he cannot become a member of another committee. In the same way, if a person is not submitting his account details with the account details of his relatives, he cannot contest the elections. This is all there in Uttaramerur inscription, and this inscription tells us about the king and its administrative functions and people. Now there's one more Tamil work. This is not an inscription, this is a Tamil work known as Periya Puranam, This Tamil work tells us about the lives of ordinary men and people who were there in the society of Chola Kingdom. So this was your chapter, Kings and